Welcome to another Meetup Live event. We're joined with our special guest, Stacy Devino. She is an international speaker and Android developer. To find out how to maximize your next job offer, learn more how to research trends and make the case to your future employer to get the compensation you deserve, including paid time off, equity, and perks. Thanks so much for joining us today, Stacy.
Thank you so much, Ashley. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm feeling it. I am so excited for everyone in the audience today to just start on their journey to getting what they want most out of their career.
We're excited to be here too. So do you want to introduce a little bit more about yourself, or I can introduce everyone to you?
Why don't you go ahead, Ashley?
Awesome. So Stacy, as we talked about, is an international keynote speaker for her work in diversity, advocacy, tech democracy, and real talk personal or technical development. She has been an Android developer for over 13 years and worked on nearly every aspect of the ecosystem, currently specializing in rich, engaging, mobile-first experience as a senior principal engineer. Her work has been featured on sites like Wired and Geek.com, in addition to being mentioned directly in published books. Stacy is an Intel innovator, GDG organizer, WWC evangelist, WTM ambassador, a Women's Tech Makers North America mentor, Google developer expert for Android, and FMR, Google Developer Group mentor. You could catch Stacy as a host of WWC Monthly Mentor Panel series online, traveling to conferences, or working in her local DFW community as a teacher and mentor for all career stages. I mean, that is in itself a very impressive resume.
It sounds crazier when someone else says it, right? You never really internalize what's going on. And even then you're like, oh, do I even put this on here?
Of course you do. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Stacy to start her presentation.
All right, y'all, you ready? So today, I think it wants to do that. All right. So today I'm here to tell you about negotiating your offer and help give you some skill sets and some tactics that are going to be fairly universal for whatever you're negotiating with regards to salary and overall compensation. And there are going to be some things that you yourself are going to work on a little bit later. But let's start at the beginning. Did you know that unless it has been stated in the job description that pay is negotiable or that compensation is negotiable, that only about 22% of the time for tech jobs will a candidate actually negotiate? That's leaving so much on the table. Now, there are situations where, you might be working for someone or trying to work for someone who has a non-negotiation policy, which that's different. But even if the pay is negotiable, only 22% of the time, candidate might negotiate. It's hard to believe, right? Well, I want to give you some truths. So first off, I am you. I am not some C-suite. I am not some VP. I am not someone from recruiting. I am a laid off tech worker, a senior principal engineer that is actively interviewing. And when I say that, I have encountered everything of this current market that you could have possibly encountered. From the bait and switches to the job disappears when you're interviewing to, hey, you came in second place. Or just the frustration of it all, where you're done and you got an offer, but they made the same offer to someone else. and they verbally accepted before you did. It's a crazy job market out there, but you are not a lost puppy. And you deserve to work in a situation that's going to work best for you. And I'm going to go ahead and add on here that I have used the tactics that I am going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation to get as much as more than 40% over an initial offer in a final offer negotiation. I've used these tactics to increase my bonus percentages, to get sign-on bonuses, and in some cases, additional stock or additional PTO time. Even further, some guarantees where they weren't able to meet everything right off the bat, but guarantees in the contract that assured that those things would happen in a certain time frame. So it's not impossible, and you deserve. It's important to realize that what you're doing as part of negotiation is you are not battling someone. Compassion and understanding will win the day. You know why? Because both you and recruiters have repeat customers. I can tell you that there is a recruiter that I worked with 3 times, in 3 separate positions at 3 different companies. Those relationships matter. The way that you treat people matters. The way that you negotiate matters. It is a dance. And ultimately, while I'm going to give you some tools for you to start out with, this is a skill. Don't expect that you are going to be able to do everything perfectly the first time. And honestly, different tactics will work for different negotiators, will work for different situations and different people. Are you equipped to play hardball if you only have, 2 weeks of money to live on? Maybe not, right? So you have to really think about, what are you looking for? What does the job matter to you? What are the skills that you are able to tap into as part of your negotiation? Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. John F. Kennedy. This is where it can get scary, especially in this economy. And that's the reason why I picked this quote, right? If you are someone who's recently been laid off and you are just, you've went through 30, 40 interview cycles, whatever it might be, do not let the current situation, unless you absolutely have to for one reason or another, make it so that you do not attempt negotiation. You should never not negotiate because you fear a potential outcome. You should have plans for those outcomes. And the truth of the matter is that it all started before you ever even got the job offer. It started during the interviews. You really have to ask yourself, did you set yourself up to be successful? And what do I mean by that? Did you interview well? You need to know, as part of interviewing, if you are the forever guy or person or woman or however you identify, or are you just the right now? And you can do this by reading body language. Did you know that judgments about people, especially in hiring and interviews, are made within the first 30 seconds to 4.5 minutes of you interviewing? Shocking, right? Because a lot of times these interviews are well over an hour long, or can be. Might even have 8 hours of them. So you got to think about, what do I do in that first 30 seconds to 4.5 minutes? And when I say judgments, I'm talking about feelings. How did you set yourself up before you ever even met that person? And more importantly, after that hour-long interview, did you know that judgment about you will only potentially change about 2% of the time? So reading their body language, and there's a bunch of tools I'll be able to point you to, but knowing whether or not they love you or you're just kind of what they need is really important when it comes to the negotiation process, because how they feel about you ultimately matters more than the facts that surround how well you did. You need to share your expectations, and they should have shared them with you. Compensation and the offers around it should not be a shock. You shouldn't be moving mountains. You should be traveling molehills. We are not talking, about having to, oh, it's 50% lower than what I was expecting. You should have never gotten there. And quite honestly, if the job changes, because I've had this as well, to being half the compensation that was stated or that you first talked about, or nearly, you should probably walk away. It's an indicator. I say probably, say should, your situation might be different, but part of negotiation is that the expectations and ultimately how we treat each other is very, very important to being successful. And did you come prepared? When I talk about this, I say, were you researched? Were you rehearsed? And did you perform? At every stage of the interview, did you nail it? Because those same tactics are important at every stage, not just getting the job, but getting the right compensation as well. So what am I talking about when I say doing the research? Are you actually in a position to negotiate? You need to be able to know your value. You need to know your value in the marketplace. What do you bring? What skills do you have? What have you been able to execute on? What are the intangibles beyond the scope of work that you bring into the job that they might need or that they might want? For example, I have a lot of speaking experience, case in point here today, and making slides. Look at how pretty all these animations and such are. And they might need someone who is technical, but can present to executives or help them grow in that particular skill set. That's something I might bring in terms of value. The value of the job, right? So how valuable is this position within this company? How much should this company pay for this job in the open marketplace? What are they expecting to pay? What is the difference? You need to know this. The value to the company and the value of the company. If this particular position is required for them to be able to intake money, that's something to consider. And we'll go into some of those tactics in just a moment. And lastly, by knowing the facts around this, or at least the generalizations, you're going to have your leverage points. You're going to know why they need you, what you're valued at, how much it matters to the company, and some other intangibles we'll go over in just a second. So knowing your market value, this is the one that everyone struggles on, right? So first, research on websites, and I'm going to list a few here, but One of the best ones is the Robert Half report. The Robert Half report is actual numbers from actual recruiters. These are from actual companies. They have differentiations based off of premiums, scales, scopes, locations. They do not have, specifics down to what language you write in. If you are a tech worker that, oh, I want to know how much Golang people are being paid. It's not going to have that level of specificity, but it is going to give you a nice starting point to know where you are in the marketplace and, what you might expect given a certain company and set of requirements. Glassdoor. Glassdoor does have a lot of great information. There is a known piece on the recruiter side. And, as part of this discussion that I'm having with you today, I spoke to about 10 different recruiters, most of which are on the executive side, some of which are only tech recruiters. But Glassdoor does have a lot of information. It is going to have more information about a specific company, and it's going to have more specificity available in terms of what your tech stack or skill set is, but it does skew low. Why? Why does it skew low? Well, there's some good reasons for this. One of the most important ones is that Glassdoor asks you to input your information in order to see other people's information. Most of the time, people who are being compensated fairly are not inputting to see whether or not they are not being compensated fairly. So it tends to skew low, and that changes. But the numbers that I've heard from recruiters is it skews about 20 to 25% lower than typical. But that can vary widely depending on the position. So just know it skews a little low in terms of, where the market might actually be. Levels.fyi. These are surprisingly accurate numbers from what I've been told. And more importantly, there are a bunch of ones that you, as an outsider, as a non-recruiter, do not have access to. Yes, there are hidden networks. In case you were ever wondering why somebody, that you never applied to is hitting you up for a job and you don't even have your information out on the public side of things. Well, it's because you submitted a resume to somebody at some point and they launched you into the network. There are a number of sites and places that have additional salary information that is not publicly available. I highly suggest that you get to know a recruiter. We're going to talk about that in a second, who can provide you more information. You can also, if you happen to own your own business, wink, wink, hint, hint, you can pay for access to some of these. So there are, specific things that Blind and other kind of reporting agencies are able to buy, to, have for purchase. Sometimes they can be, not that expensive. Sometimes it's very expensive. So, it's really about what that actually matters to you. But this is just the first bit, right? This is just open research. Next, I want you to ask your peers. And when I say ask your peers, I'm saying where you want to be. They are at a similar company to what you are negotiating for, at a similar position, and that are scaled appropriately, right? So if you are interviewing for a company that's based in Cleveland, Ohio, and is local, maybe you shouldn't be scaling your pay against one of the larger San Francisco FANG organizations. You should be scaling it more appropriately to where you are and where you want to be and what this company is actually providing. But I also want you to ask, what skill sets are currently being valued by their organization and by other organizations? Because you might find out as part of your negotiation, wow, I'm really undervaluing myself in the market. And maybe, we are too far apart because maybe I didn't do my right thing first. I suggest that you do all of this research before you ever get to the negotiation stage, before you ever have to think about these things, because you're really setting yourself up really early in terms of what your actual negotiation is going to look like. So everyone that is here today, good on you for getting this done ahead of time. And it's also really, really valuable for knowing where you are in the market when it comes to promotions. Finally, dun, 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 I want you to ask recruiters. I thought I was working with a recruiter. Yeah, because recruiters know markets. They have access to all these hidden tools. When I say recruiters, I don't just mean ones that you've talked to recently. I want you to go through your LinkedIn and go, hey, I see that you're hiring for this, this, and this. What are you currently paying for that role? What are you currently looking for in these similar positions? Or you just filled these positions. What did you pay for those, if you can, right? Or can you give me a ballpark? And here's the other part. They don't just know markets. They know what employers are willing to pay, because they know the same information that your peer set knows, combined with hidden information and the research on websites. And they also know how valuable it is to that particular company, because maybe they're a contracting company and they've worked with them before, or any number of things. There's a whole hidden network in recruiters that if you can be a nice, helpful individual, you can tap into. And when I say ask recruiters, I say, don't forget to ask your recruiter. Yes, your recruiter. Why? It's in their best interest to get you in the job at a fair wage than it is for them to try to negotiate you down. Well, why would that be? Well, because they're judged by placements. They're judged by successful placements. They are judged not on the fact that they got you for, 20% under market. Because guess what? They know that you're going to talk to your peers and go, gosh darn it, why am I making 20% less than everyone else? They want to set you up to be successful. You will find out. You will eventually know. If they know that that's something that they're willing to pay, or it's within the ballpark of what they're willing to pay, in a lot of cases, it is in their best interest to just pay you. Get the job filled, get the resource going, get you in job. So I talked a little bit about your premium as part of talking to your peers and figuring out your skill sets. You command a premium when you know that you are uniquely capable for what that company needs and in the time frame they needed it. It's important to know that sometimes roles are open for a very long time because, one, they might be looking to find that magical rainbow unicorn with a purple squirrel on its back, or, they may not. And they haven't really been in a rush to fill this role because it's ancillary or exploratory, or they don't have a client for it yet. They might be actually using the recruiting process to figure out whether or not they really want this role. And you might be the first, right? To even come into this kind of pipeline. So they may not be, as highly encouraged. You need to figure out as part of your interviewing, do they need you? How much do they need you? How much do they need what you actually bring to the table? As part of that, capturing that value, we need to be able to determine what is fair compensation. And I say fair because we have to realize that companies still need to be able to operate, right? They need to be able to pay us, and we need to be able to accomplish the things they need. but, we do not have unlimited funds or resources. So, unless you are certain organizations that seem to just print money, thinking about some of the analytics organizations right now, or certain social media organizations too. But so how can we determine what is fair for this role and where should we start? So we really want to look first at the financials of the company. Yes, financials of the company. If you are interviewing for a public company, this information is public. If you are interviewing at a startup, go ahead and ask, can you give me the one pager that you are giving to your seed rounds about the current financials of the company? What's the TAM, or total addressable market? All of that. You know why? Because we need to know, quote unquote, our P&Ls, right? So I don't know how many financiers that we have in the room, but P&L, profits and losses. EBITDA is another one that you'll hear, especially on the retail side. We want to look at our growth. What's the growth proposition? Am I going to be looking at, being able to actually count on this bonus percentage to roll through? And I need to know year over year, what does that actually look like? And more importantly, I need to know what that looks like in terms of the actual people and how are they being compensated year over year. It doesn't matter a lot if they're having a lot of success, but they're not sharing that with the people that are making them successful. How does this role affect revenue? This is a hard one, right? But I call this my touching money rule. So let me get that. Yep. Oop, I'm touching money, right? So how far am I from affecting those P&Ls? Am I saving in terms of, overall revenue, or am I generating revenue? How am I generating revenue? Am I directly taking in payments? Am I directly enabling some large customer? Am I, doing anything that's going to capture the ability to pay my paycheck, right? And how much money am I touching? Because if I'm touching a lot of money, or I'm very responsible for money, that's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. And part of that responsibility should be captured in your value, right? Is there a pre-existing commitment? Are you being brought in as a backfill? Are you being brought in as someone for a time-sensitive project, either to capitalize on a market trend or in order to meet some deadline put out with shareholders or as part of seed funding? Are they in a massive growth situation, or are they really needing you to come in to make sure that they continue to generate revenue, not necessarily grow? Is there a pre-existing commitment? What is the time frame on it? Because that says how much they need the job. They need the job filled. They need it in order to move forward. And stresses a certain level of importance to operations. I wonder how many people have heard this acronym before. BATNA. So that means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And I say BATNA the lifestyle. Now, BATNA is a set of techniques in order to move forward in case of a negotiation failure. But I want you to come in with your best alternatives already planned. And part of this is really just analyzing yourself, analyzing their situation, and understanding that, hey, there might not be as much mobility as you're hoping on, base salary or overall stated compensation. So what are some of the alternatives that we can look at? So there are 4 other ways or other things to negotiate for. 1, so bonus alternatives. Can we reach our numbers with different numbers? I say different numbers because, there might be a lot of, static around what they can pay in terms of overall salary. Maybe they have an obligation in terms of a public company, seed company, whatever it might be. But is there a way that we can reach that number with different numbers? And when I say different numbers, I'm talking about bonus percentages. I'm talking about stock grants or options. What are they being valued at? What do you think is going to be fair in the marketplace? And, to a certain degree, and I kind of say not to do this as much, but, bonus, sign-on bonus. Right? So I've had a situation myself where, because of the limitations of this large company, they were not able, for the actual position that they had, to give me the full amount that I was hard on. I needed a minimum of this. So we made it work by giving me an outsized sign-on bonus so that I would meet my compensation minimum for that negotiation. It worked. They got what they wanted. I got what I wanted. I talk about another bonus alternative. Company didn't want to pay me as much as I was worth on the open marketplace. What did I do? All right, hand me more stock, and hand me that stock as a sign-on bonus with a 30-day vest. It was a pre-IPO company, but give me something. Give me something, right? We want to figure out a way to get to our numbers. How do we do it with different numbers? How do we do it with different strategies? How do we look outside of the existing compensation package and maybe make adjustments? Instead of stock grants, how do we add some maybe stock options? Do they have flexibility there? And more importantly, when you're in an early stage company, how do you get yourself into some higher series stock, right? Some preferred shares. Another way we can negotiate sometimes is actually in benefit packages. So one thing that some companies might be willing to flex on a little bit is to say, okay, well, if you cover all of my healthcare costs associated with, this, and I'll be kind of upfront with what that might be in your situation. Yeah, that'll work. It's a different kind of number. And sometimes those benefit packages can be pretty big. And, when I talk about being able to care for a loved one, sometimes there's ways at different companies to actually throw money into accounts through their benefits that allow that money not to be taxed if it's used for the care of another individual. There's ways to do that sometimes with regards to other healthcare and other benefits. Again, that's not going to be applicable for some of our non-United States folks, but those are important too. Time off and flexibility. Maybe this is something you actually need in order to be successful at the job. So time is money, which means flexibility is worth money, and it's always worth it. Do you need to not work from 3 to 4 because you got to pick up your kids from school? Do you need extra time off in order to handle some things in your personal life? Or do you just want more time off? So when we talk about ways that, some places might want to compensate you, standard benefits packages for most organizations, at least in the United States, unfortunately look like 2 weeks of paid time off, sometimes 3, does not always include holidays. Hey, welcome. So negotiating that you're going to have that kind of time off, that flexibility that you need in order to perform your best is actually really important. And lastly, let's look at contractual promises. So maybe they can't do it right now, but can we put titles, promotions, and guarantees in the actual contract itself? If I meet all of these qualifications, you are going to give me this bonus. If I am able to make all of this happen for within this time frame, I am going to get promoted. This is actually a lot of the ways that contract to hire work already happens. Is there? It's essentially a contractual promise with a trial period, except in this case, you're being hired with the promise, and putting it in the contract is really important. I will say also on these contractual promises, they may not be as enforceable as you want them to be. I've had contractual promises where they basically said, fight me, but when they didn't hold up their full side of the bargain. So, it is a risk you take. Sometimes, treat it as that, right? Where this matters to you, but if you don't get it, sometimes it's better to walk. So, do have what that means to you. 4, cashing in on what we know. So what does this actually look like in terms of the process thus far? So I want you to know, in terms of the company that you've actually been interviewing with, that they have spent on an average tech worker between 30 and 60 hours of time on you as a candidate by the time you've reached the negotiation stage. This is time in analyzing your resume. And I'm not talking about all the resumes and all the other people that they've interviewed. I'm talking about specifically how much time they have spent on you. This is time working with a recruiter. This is time working with all of the different people that you actually interviewed with, whatever preparation was necessary in order to move you forward. Every time they made a judgment on you, every time you've had an hour of interviews, they've spent 2 hours on the other side, at least. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money. Remember, at the end of interviews, before they've even made an offer, they've gone back to every single person that you've interviewed. And more than likely, they had a meeting all together for an hour just talking about you. And if you met with 8 to 10 individuals during that time, that is automatically 8 to 10 hours that they just spent on you in one conversation. It's not cheap. What does this actually translate to? 20 to 40% of what that salary is for that position is actually the amount of money they've also spent to hire you. If you were wondering how contract recruiters make their money, there you go. Because if they hire you at, $150,000, they just made 30 for their company. Easy. And the average tech position takes 42 days to fill, regardless of level. I mean, there is some variance, but it took them 42 days from opening to hiring. That might be a little different right this second, but that's what it has been for the last 5 years, or approximately. So, whoa, this is a lot of work, and that's a lot of money, time spent before I've ever seen an offer. So what are we kind of gone through right now, right? Like, interview. We need to make sure that we're the rightest fit for the job, not just for us, but also for them. That we've researched. We know the value to you, the value to them, what my value is in the marketplace, what my premiums are. This is all part of being in that right fit. I've thought about the alternatives. I'm ready to present alternatives. As part of the negotiation process, I'm coming in with that same level of research, rehearsal, preparedness that I did in the interview process. It's not a bad thing. And I understand the investments that have been made on me as a candidate as part of this process. And I know what the value is that I already represent. Because again, at this point, I am not a lost puppy. You've invested a lot in me. Are you willing to walk away from that? Finally, we're going to get into the implementation. So we're kind of at the hardest part, and I promise this will go pretty quickly because this is really where we execute on the knowledge. We've done all the hard work. So how do I be effective with this information? So I'm going to call out specifically that there are a number of negotiation techniques, and not everyone will work for everyone, right? You need to use the skills that you have at your disposal and that you have used successfully in the workplace to get the best result here. And that means that you need to know what you're willing to accept. Because we came in with a plan. We know what we want in terms of our minimum salary and our target salary. What is our minimum total compensation? Does this meet that? Or is it higher? Don't come in telling them your minimums. Go a little higher. Then negotiate, right? We know what we are in the comparable market value, so we can use that as a leverage point as well. We come in with alternatives ready. And lastly, the hardest part is that personal commitment. Because we need to know how to balance how much we want the position with what we are willing to do, and how much we are worth will lead to a satisfied outcome. You only have one power in this negotiation, and that's the power of no. And it kind of, and I hate to use this word, but it trumps all others, right? You are in power, even if you only have one power. And that means that you need to know when you're willing to walk, how to use time as a tool, your communication skills, and honestly, every skill you bring to the workplace or the job, or that's helped you on a team project, if this is your first negotiation, this is the same thing. You're just working with someone else in order to meet a goal. And as part of this final, I want to say thank you to everyone here for coming today and investing in yourself. If you want to find the slides, the link is there, social contacts, and a couple of resources that I think hold value for everyone, especially the negotiator course by Developer. Even if you're not a woman or identify as such, take the course. It's not that expensive, guarantees. As well as read the Zoom by Melinda Marcus, who I had a pleasure of meeting this weekend, and Never Split the Difference by terrorist negotiator Chris Voss.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stacy. So we are going to jump right into Q&A. We had a lot of really interesting questions sent to us. So our first one from an anonymous attendee: how to negotiate in the fintech industry with lots of finance and accounting experience, but limited tech experience.
So how are you able to you're really lucky because you have the financial knowledge to be able to speak from a place of experience and a place of confidence in that information. If you are new to the tech space, that is just one of the things that you need to acknowledge as part of your negotiations. But honestly, financial literacy is going to be a huge help as part of just any position. I brought up some specific financial terms. Excuse me, just some water. Because I think that anyone who is coming into a negotiation that doesn't have an idea of the financials of the company that they're jumping into is going to not be as successful, or, maybe push for something that the company itself just can't provide. So in terms of, your early stage, you're bringing yet another skill. That is financial literacy. Being able to speak about that and how it actually relates to your work is probably one of the biggest things that I would say that a lot of very high level engineers and really solid managers are able to do exceptionally well. That is yet another tool in your toolbox as part of negotiation, is not just knowing on the other side, but you're able to relate what you do and what you're going to do and how you're actually going to be able to execute in terms of the actual impact on the company. So that's the way I would frame it. Is yes, you might be new, but hey, here's all the different skill sets I'm bringing. I work with, people at various stages of their career, especially folks that are relatively new in tech. And one thing I always say is, don't hide your inexperience. Talk about how your other experiences add value. So, okay, you did a career transition. What do you know and what did you learn as part of other careers and other jobs that you've had? Are you coming in with manager experience? Are you coming in with just experience in knowing how to work for someone, how to communicate effectively, all of those things? So that's where some of my suggestions are. I hope that was able to answer the question for you.
Awesome. I think that's some great advice. We had Susan come in with, I've tried to negotiate my rate when I got an offer, but I was told it was non-negotiable, even though the pay rate was transparent as a pay range, minimum to maximum. So they offered me a close average to the minimum limit. Would you advise on pushing back in this case?
Yeah, because guess what? Are you going to take the job if it's the minimum? Honestly, are you willing to walk? Because maybe that's what they're planning on. Oh, well, the market's a little whatever, especially because contracting companies, guess what? Every dollar they take out of your pocket on that particular one is dollars in theirs, right? If it's an hourly contract rate, they might be getting as high as 200%. I found out that was happening in one situation. They were making over 100% on every hour that I worked. And I was, no, you're doubling my rate. And you can make 40. Right? So those are important to note. Are you willing to walk over that? Can you ask that recruiter, hey, how much are you charging for these hours? What do you think is appropriate or fair? What are you bringing to the position that allows it to be uniquely filled? I had a conversation yesterday with a recruiter who was going, this is what the rate is. This is what I'm like going, yeah, that's about half of what I'm willing to take. And here's why. And then he was like, yeah, I was kind of hoping we could find somebody with 5 years of experience. And I just came back and I'm going, hit me up if something comes through, but I'm more than happy to share this information, but I'll be kind of realistic with you. And I don't think this is a surprise. You're probably really looking for someone who's, a talented individual with 3 years of experience. And then they usually come back and go, yeah, you're probably right. I'm probably just not searching for the right thing. Like going, yeah, why don't you try doing this, this, and this? I just immediately took what was kind of a bad opportunity and put somebody in my pocket. Right? So even if this job isn't for you, even if this number isn't for you, figure out, what is it in the marketplace? How do you turn this person into an advocate? How do you turn this, kind of rate disparity into an opportunity? And ask them, what do they really need? What do they need to get that top end of the rate? What is separating me from that?
So we also had someone ask, depending on your answer on this question of what is your rate, if you're out of the range, does that put you out are you filtering yourself out of getting this job based on that answer? And how can you, you know, be creative or feasible to get yourself back into back into the, possibility of candidate pool based on that?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say, if you're not at least 80% there, you're not there. Like you're not there. The very real kind of thing here is that, at least for permanent positions with direct hiring recruiters, most of the time their flexibility in terms of pay kind of maxes out at 20 to 25% that they can move in terms of everything. And that's a maximum, is what I'll go ahead and say. And as part of talking to that recruiter, really understand, how urgent this job is, how close are we? Is this, when I talk about like, hey, are you up for being able to negotiate some of the other parts of this compensation? So maybe the base salary is not right, but there are ways that we can negotiate to get the total compensation to what you want it to be. Hey, as part of this, do you have a way that I can maybe adjust to get more PTO or to get some of these other things? They are expecting, or they are wanting you to actually negotiate sometimes, even if they don't initially disclose it.
And we also had someone ask, have you ever found that sharing benefits or offers from other companies help with negotiating?
Sometimes, but usually only in very high level positions, is what I'll say, because they are negotiating for you. Competing offers are really something that I think about more in terms of, you already work at a company and they want to try and keep you. Sometimes competing offers are just that, competing offers, where you can say, hey, I am currently interviewing. I do currently have, an offer on the table. It's, it's north of your current range, but and this is what I've said to other companies. And when I say I do this, I mean, I've said no. I have said no. I'm unemployed in this market and told people no. So, that has everything to do with the luxury of my situation. But you have to kind of think about the other side, right? Use that as a last tactic. You should be negotiating for that job, right? They want to know that there's some reciprocity here, right? It's different to say that I'm actively interviewing, which is to say that I'm also actively available, which is another way to say it, versus, hey, I have offers on the table. If you can't compete, then get lost, right? Because you want to find some common ground of mutual mutual love, mutual respect. And mutual respect doesn't usually happen because you told somebody else to kick rocks to a certain degree.
And I think we have time for one more question, and we're going to go into those. Dominica asks, if those first 4 minutes went wrong, should I cut my losses and leave? Is it wise to engage in some comfortable activity like small talk or to ask questions about their company / their day to make myself feel / look more confident, and then move on to a proper job interview after those crucial 4 minutes?
Yeah, they got to like you first. So, honestly, as part of that kind of initial set, you should have done your research before you ever got into that room. You should have asked your recruiter who you were interviewing with. You should have researched them on LinkedIn, Justia Patents, everything, right? Figure out who their best friend was in college if you really want to go that far, which I have done. So, it's like going, oh yeah, I was able to find that you really have a lot of patents around this particular area, but I don't start with that. I don't want to start stalker. I want to be able to drop little pieces, right? As part of the, part of understanding their knowledge base, also understanding where they might ask questions, where there are similarities in either what we do professionally or even some hobbies we might have, where I might want to drop hints about, hey, I noticed you're really into keyboards. Where like, oh, I don't even say you should never call them out, but just to say, oh yeah, if you hear some clicking in the background, I have my mechanical keyboard here. I'm kind of into them. I build my own kind of thing. And then they just come in and go, ooh, right? Like you've instantly created an avenue to get to know each other. And I would argue that you do this same level of research and understanding the first time you meet anybody else in a new company or in an existing company, that you come in prepared with the right questions, with a level of personal understanding, to kind of drop the little hints and read their body language. Did they kind of do a little thing at you, or do they look disinterested? How do I pause and go, I know I've just given you a lot of information. I want to kind of pause here and provide an opportunity for you to ask me some questions. Is there anything about what I just presented that you might find particularly interesting, or I can go into more depth on, right? You want to set yourself up for success before you ever get into the room. And furthermore, the salespeople I know actually will go and check in on LinkedIn, say, hey, I know that we're interviewing tomorrow. I just wanted to reach out and, say a hello before we get there, right? So that they're maybe prepared for that same level of knowledge, so that they know you before they show up in a room with you. Because a lot of times people only start reviewing, maybe an hour ahead of time, at most, sometimes 30 minutes before they're dropped in a room with you. Are they going to do that same level of research? Do you think the recruiter did that same level of research? For some companies, that's true. If you come in, researched, rehearsed, and perform, you will make it past that 4 minutes. Don't ever cut them off and walk away unless it is the wrong situation. There is one time I have done that, and I was put into a room with 15 other people where they rapid fired in a circle. I just said, I don't think I'm the person you're looking for. Grabbed my things and walked out. There are exceptions to every rule. But in this case, if it's not going well, if you are not happy with the way that the interviews are going, unless you are very, in need, maybe the rightest situation is to walk away. This week I did that, where, I wasn't thoroughly impressed. I wasn't, I didn't want to waste their time. But at the same point in time, I want to do it in the most respectful way possible, so that I am making advocates for the future. Because like I said at the beginning of this, we have repeat customers. We are going to see people again. We are going to interact with those recruiters again. We are going to interact with those hiring managers again. We are going to interact with the engineers and product people that we may have seen in an interview cycle again. So at the end of the day, this is a dance. It is all about being compassionate and understanding. If they're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. The facts are also not aligned. Maybe this isn't the right position. Focus elsewhere.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for answering these questions and for this awesome overview. Before we go, I'm just going to share 2 more slides quickly. So we are running a special offer. Learn more about Meetup's career resources, including a free 2-month trial of our Member Plus subscription. You could check it out by scanning the QR code or the link that was added into the chat. And we also have a podcast called Keep Connected with our CEO, David Siegel. David talks with Meetup organizers as well as leaders in our community. You could scan the QR code and give it a listen. And as a reminder, you can review a recap of this event in a few days on our blog, meetup.com/blog. And I just want to thank everyone again for signing in today. And thank you so much, Stacy, for joining with us today and for giving us your time.
Thank you so much. And like I said earlier, I am always available. DM me, I will answer. So if you really need help, I do have a Calendly link. I don't just post it anywhere, but you know, helping people is what I live for. And it's what I look for in my jobs. And to that degree, I'm still looking too for that right fit. So you know, you have an advocate right
Thank
here.
you so much.